break it? Okay, everyone, thanks for coming. That is awfully loud. Welcome to the Grow Your Own EDI Superuser course. So yeah, let's get into it. Our goals for today, the main goals today are just to read and understand the error messages that we generate, understanding the error messages that outside entities generate, clearinghouses, payers, understand how your data is getting routed through to these entities outside, and then understanding how information is returned back into your office. So the big three we want to talk about today when it comes to data for claim information and whatnot is eligibility claims and electronic remittance advice. So we're going to start with eligibility, but kind of before we get into all us as a clearinghouse. So if you have questions, and we hear from clients all the time about who is our clearinghouse, that's us technically. When it comes to who we utilize, you might have heard earlier today when we were going over, especially with the stuff related to Change Healthcare, is what clearinghouse do we use? We utilize a ton. We have direct connections with some payers. We use Change Healthcare, we use Availity, we use Optum. We have a whole host of different payers and entities that we route stuff through. But when it comes to it, we are the first, the first step for all of that. So it goes to our local PCC servers that we take that information and then process it out to individual clearinghouses. So if you happen to have any ERA signups or whatnot, you may end up having the answer that PCC is your clearinghouse. Let's look at eligibility. We're looking at when things go wrong, the payer response errors that you get and how those appear in your system. So here's a list of pre-submission failures here. I'm going to just step away. And actually, Jerry, could you just turn me down? I feel like I'm very loud. Pre-submission request failures, a ton of these you can see on the screen, and date of birth is missing, eligibility ID is blank, etc. These are common things that you're going to get into your system, and this is not, I think, every one of them, but I think this is most of them. You're going to see this on your eligibility screen. So when you're checking patient eligibility, you'll have listed under the alert where the patient's date of birth is missing, and then we'll have some kind of explanation below that for the type of error message that you're getting. We do recommend an action for those. You can do this now like in the eligibility tool. Also just as a plug again, you can also check eligibility for patients even though they don't have an appointment, and they can still generate these errors. Look at eligibility, we have two transaction types. We have 270, which is the inquiry. So this is us sending information out to the payers to see if this patient is eligible, and then we get a 271 response back. That's where we're going to be seeing those types of errors that are coming back. So if you send it out, they can't find the patient, something's not matching. Those are the responses that you're getting back into your system. This is going to be payer response errors. So this is once it's gone out to their system, it comes back. We now have a whole slew of different things here that can happen. Inappropriate dates, you have invalid missing patient ID, all of those. These are items that you'll have back, and it is really relying on the information that the payer has. So it could be that you have a typo in the patient's name, or it could be that they have a typo in the patient's name. It's really important for these type of messages. I like to especially focus on the ones that are focusing on patient ID and their name and information. These are ones that we can do our best to try to help you with, but a lot of times, a lot of these errors are ones that it requires you to call the payer and double check to make sure, all right, how do you have them recorded in your system? Are they in your system? Especially for newborns, this is something that might come up. Especially if you have the parent is covered for the first 30 days, if they have that on their policy, and you're billing out for newborns, those are going out. When those come back after 30 days, if you have a next visit for them, you may start getting these errors because it had already cleared before because it was going under the parent's information, but if it's now trying to be sent out under the patient, if their systems have been updated or the parents have not called to add them to their insurance policy, you're probably going to get a handful of these errors. Again, same information, or kind of same look that you're going to have. You're going to have that red alert You'll have the eligibility response, usually will be listing as undetermined, and then they'll be giving some information. This particular example is that the certificate number doesn't match the patient's information. Again, verifying your cards in the system, making sure that their policy number is accurate, and if it is for what you have for the card, verifying that that is actually the most up-to-date card with the family, and then last step would then be calling the payer to verify that information is there. So this is something that we had done last year. We did a 60-day analysis of payer response errors. Of the 1.2 million submissions that we had 254,000 that came back with errors. The highest one that we got was data service not within allowable inquiry period. So again, if they have limits to, we can do same-day eligibility for those patients, but if they have limits that they say, no, we don't have a data service, or that was something that we were having when we were looking too far out. So you have a patient that's being seen in, let's say, 2 months, and you want to check their eligibility. The payer may say, well, we don't know that right now, even though they do have a record of their policy number. They don't want to give the go-ahead until it's a little bit closer to that date. I believe that's just a few days out, generally. Again, unable to respond, and then you start getting into those heavy ones where you have patient information is not accurate, or they're stating that they don't have that information in their system that matches up with what you're sending out. Let's moving on to claims. So this is going to be stuff that we generate first. So these are going to be looking at the pre-submission errors. So if you're comparing the two systems for the claims tools, if you're looking at the claim error report in practice management, you may just see claim to error. This is essentially what those are going to be. The new claim tool does go into more depth and will show more information on what those claim errors are. And then we're going to look at payer response rejections. So when those go out to the payer, what kind of information are they sending back to you? What can you do about those? Pre-submission errors that are really common. Again, it's mostly information is not there. If you don't have the relationship code, if that's invalid, if the date of birth is missing, payer ID. The idea with the pre-submission errors, these are things that we feel are easily catchable, and we can tell you, look, we're not even going to send this out the door to the payer yet, because we know if we try to send this out, they're going to kick it right back immediately. So these are the ones that just make sure that this information is set and can be fixed. Usually that's a pretty quick fix to update that information and then send those back out the door. But again, this is the stuff that when you see those errors coming back and this is claim to error, this is what we're talking about, and this is the information that will show up in a few different locations. The new claims tool will have more information. You also can look in practice management in the correct mistakes program and OOPS. You can also dive into that particular error message and it will show you what we are kicking back and the reason why those claims are not going out the door. Again, when you do see those messages, a difference between this type of error and a clearinghouse error is that these haven't left yet. So when I have clients try to tackle certain items first, you have your rejections coming back from payers, but at least they got it or they almost got it, and I'll get into that a little bit later. These ones haven't even made it out. So these won't have any kind of trigger for timely filing. These are the ones that you really should focus on making sure that they're getting out the door, at least that initial time, because that's really important to make sure that you're hitting your timely filing requirements. Oh, and more pre-submission errors from PCC. So needs correction work list. This again is one of those other places that you can see and work down through those. So this will give you more information on those reasons. And like we had showed earlier, with the new part of the claims tool, with doing the claim correction portion of that in the EHR, you can click, edit demographics or edit policy. You can go into those specific places when you're going through that list, but this is just going to be your needs correction here at this stage. As far as claims, these are the transaction types. You have your submission, you have a file acknowledgement that comes from a few different entities along the way, you have a claim status request, and then a claim status response. Looking at claims, one of the biggest things we like to point out the difference between paper and electronic. So the paper HCFA that I'm sure you're all very well acquainted with, generally when we submit stuff electronically, payers may come back and state, well, it's this box needs to be edited. This box is not correct, or you need this information here in the box. We don't actually submit out a like scanned version of a PDF of a HCFA. We don't have a clean, all right, here is box X information. We do have some crosswalks that I'm going to get into that show kind of this is the information here, and you'll hear we have stuff that's loops. So in some of the error messages that you get into your system, you may see that some of those say, like loop 2010BA, subscriber not found. That's the information that they're kicking back, and what we're sending out in these loops is the information they're receiving. Sometimes the payers will take that information and they will transcribe it in their own software for their staff. They'll transcribe that into a HCFA 1500 format. But that is not what we're sending over. This is the standard that everyone in the industry is using to submit those, but they may have their own software that starts to transcribe that, and that's why sometimes we may have issues from that. Again, more information about the crosswalk, about where that is. We have this in here, so if you want to look at the slides later. I don't expect to have you go through these, and I'm not going to read off every single line for what these equate to, because that would really bore you to death. Another thing, this is looking at the electronic claim file. This is what we are sending out. It looks like a lot of gobbledygook, and you can kind of filter through and see some information. But each of the fields there does have a really specific purpose that we're shipping out to the clearinghouses. When you're going through and we're trying to verify, so if you have ever called in or asked and said, the payer is saying that you're sending out this. We look at here and actually look at the digital file for what we sent and can confirm whether or not that's the case. So we don't really enjoy when you call and we say, well, it's the payer because you've already called them. And you're calling us and it's kind of a, they said this. But we like to pull this up, and this is something that you can get to yourself. If you want to verify, we're always happy. If you would like to sit and look and have us walk out over some of these points, this is in the correct mistakes program in OOPS. If you look at the line specifically that says, Blue Cross Blue Shield ECS number this. You can do C claim report bill with one of the function keys, and that will pull this up and see all the information that you're shipping out with that file. File acknowledgements. These are things that you're not going to see too much. We monitor this to make sure that if there are acknowledgements coming in and if all of a sudden you start having errors, our wonderful EDI team will start looking into those. That was one of the big triggers for Change Healthcare, is that we all of a sudden stopped getting stuff back. We were essentially shipping stuff into no man's land, and all of a sudden our 999s just disappeared. Next one, claim status request. These generate just an automatic request when the original claim is sent, and then the response is usually an acceptance or rejection message that generally is going to come back in a format that you can read. And then we have payer rejections. So these look a little different for different payers. Some payers, they're all the same and they have the same exact format. Some of them like to throw their own information and coding for their own internal stuff on there. But again, this is information that you can go and use correct mistakes program, and you can view these rejections and see exactly why. Because most of the time, if you're looking at the claim error report in SRS, one of the biggest complaints that we get is that you run that report, it tells you who has errors, who has rejections, and then you go over and you see A7 acknowledgement rejected for, and then it cuts off. So this is the full message that you're going to see there. You can go into correct mistakes and see all of that, and ideally that gives you enough information, and they have given it to us in a way that's pretty clear about what's going on and why something was rejected. I'm going to step on my soapbox for a little bit and also talk about rejections that have been happening a lot recently that we've been seeing is you call the payer because you got a rejection back and they tell you, we don't see the claim in the system. We can't tell you why this was rejected because we don't see it. During the process of sending your claims out, they'll go out from us. Usually they'll hit a clearinghouse, but there may be a direct connection that we have. But it'll go out to a clearinghouse. They'll say, yes, we've got it. We've moved this along to the payer. The payer will get it, and they will say, we've rejected this. We are not accepting it into our adjudication system. Unfortunately, at that point, it's hit their EDI servers, and they've decided that they're not going to take it in at all. So when you call them and you say, hey, why did this reject? You didn't accept it into your system. The employees that you're speaking to on the phone, usually the insurance companies, because it hasn't even come in for adjudication, they don't have it. And that's why it's really important when we're looking at having information to go back to the payer with, and even potentially speaking to someone who can access the EDI records for that, is looking at those payer claim control numbers. That's really important if you can get those. Usually you'll have a clearinghouse trace number or a payer trace number or claim control number. Those are the IDs that really follow through of, yes, they got it, and here's the proof that you've received this. So if you want to bring that up to them, ideally that will help you. I know it's not always what will work. Some individuals have called recently to payers and they say, well, I can't look it up by that. And that's when you really should try to, fight and say, then can you please transfer me to somebody who can look it up by that number and give me more information on why this is. Sometimes we can look at the rejection and we might be able to figure out maybe what's going on. But that's kind of the information that you really want to focus on, are those payer claim control numbers and trace numbers, because those are the electronic signatures basically that information is passing from one place to another. Just different information on here. One thing to talk about with this, smart edits. They're wonderful. Those have changed over time. Some smart edits used to be, this is just a message because we think you could have done something wrong. We didn't actually check to see if you did something wrong, but we see this procedure code and this procedure code, so we're going to not take this in for 5 business days, and then then we'll take it in eventually. We'll take it in after the 5 days. But if you feel that this is accurate, you can resubmit again. So they've decided that they just want to delay that claim processing for an extra 5 business days. Now, we also have some other different smart edits that are coming in that are actually appropriate and are more attuned to a proper rejection for that smart edit. So it's really important to read when you go through these and verify that this is not just we're delaying this for a few days, and make sure it's an actual rejection. Because some smart edits will do that, but there is a big difference between the two, that this would not be solved just by submitting it back again. It would be something that you would have to fix. They do, for the smart edit specifically, they do like to say for UHC, we have this guide to go through. It isn't the most exciting read, but it is something that they do offer to go through and say specifically why they're denying something. Yeah.
So I've gotten these types of rejections before, but recently I've gotten CLIA ID incorrect, but there's no further information.
Yeah, so the question was, and this is my fault for not saying, we do have a microphone there if you want to go. No, that's fine, I'll repeat the question. So we do have a microphone if folks want to come up and ask questions there. And we also have a microphone for folks on the chat room. The CLIA one is hard. I know a lot of our practices are CLIA waived. The question was, they've just sent back a rejection stating CLIA number not found, and then that's it. Generally with those, it's making sure that they know that you're CLIA waived, making sure that proper modifiers are being used. It has unfortunately been kind of an uptick recently for those. Yeah. Specifically, like QW modifiers we've seen has had success, but again, it's verifying to make sure that the QW is actually appropriate. I don't want to just give blanket, oh yeah, you have a lab, put a QW on it. Make sure that that is something appropriate for your coding, and making sure that, I believe there's a lookup site for CLIA to make sure that information, if your practice is registered, see the information online there. And those are kind of the tools you can go back to the payer, say, hey, why are these getting rejected? This is the information we have, or we're CLIA waived, or here's our CLIA number. If it's something that the CLIA number is not going out at all, absolutely, we can look into that to make sure that information is being passed along on the claim. And it's pretty quick for our EDI team to take a look at that.
So when I looked at that to try to figure out what CLIA number they were getting, I didn't see it. I'm pretty good at reading the dark side on OOPS, but I don't see where y'all send it out. Is that right?
I believe you should see it in the file. If you're not seeing it in the file and that's something that we expect to be going out, please reach out to us and we can make sure that that information is being passed.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
All right, moving on to the third item, electronic remittance, your ERAs. Things go wrong, you have ERA delays, you have charges forced to manual entry, and agreements to receive more ERA. So ERA delays, we like to talk about this because specifically when we have our clients call and it's like, hey, I have a check that came into our bank and we don't have the ERA yet for it. What's going on with that? For the ACA, there is operating rules that have been in effect since 2014, generally to try to make sure that there's not too much of a lag. The real requirement that we stick to, and this is the one that the payers have to follow, is that they have to have submitted that ERA at no later than 3 business days after the effective date of payment, and they can't send it to you any more than 3 days prior. So that 3-day window on either side, that's why sometimes if you look at AutoPIP or the new claims tool, or the new ERA tool, you'll see that you have ERAs in your system for checks that you've not received yet. You shouldn't be getting those any more than 3 business days. Most payers do follow this. We usually see a lot more questions when it comes to, we've gotten the check and now this ERA has not come in and it's been a week. And that's where we end up having to open up cases with clearinghouses potentially or with the payer. But the ideal for this, and sometimes even why we may ask you to call back. So if you call us and it's just the day after the check, we may say, unfortunately, we can't even open up a case until that 3 business days has passed. So that is something just to make note of when you call us, is that if it hasn't been 3 business days, we really can't we can open up a case, but they're just going to turn around and tell us, well, it hasn't been 3 business days. So that's something to keep in mind for those. Just more information on this, 3 business days after the check deposit date, you can open up a case by making sure the check EFT transaction/trace number. So if you have that trace number and you have that check, giving that information to us. So this is basically how we can build the case. The amount for the check, the date that it was deposited, and I know this sounds crazy when you say, we don't have an ERA, and we say, well, give us a copy of the EOB. We don't have it. We ask that you go either if you have a paper EOB that has been mailed to your office, or if you have access to a payor portal to get that. These are requirements that the clearinghouses are asking us to provide for them so they can investigate. We absolutely know it's kind of crazy when you have a check and you're looking for an ERA. They say, we'll provide a copy of it. Well, we don't have it. That is something that we absolutely need so that we can send that case out to clearinghouses and do that investigation for you. Another fun thing for ERAs that we like to point out, we did this last year, is if you have any kind of downcoding or you have any kind of code changes. I know last year we happened to have the code combinations of the MMR and varicella vaccines that were happening, where you were billing out the MMR, you were billing out varicella, you did 2 distinct immunizations, and the payers were coming back and combining it into a single MMRV, which is not accurate. I don't think, if anyone, please tell me if they're still doing that. I think that they did roll back those changes because they were getting in trouble because it doesn't follow proper coding rules. And again, if you see that, please let us know. The more common instance of what we see here is downcoding. So you build out a 214 or a 215, and they come back and say, no, we actually think it's just a 213. And instead of rejecting it or turning around and saying we think it's overcoded or asking you to do an audit, they'll just come and pay you as the old one. They'll send back a different code to our system and just pay you based on that. So what we see here for this is that we actually have that submitted if different. So you'll see the procedure code is over on the left-hand side, and then you'll see the submitted code that you as a practice actually sent out to the payers, and that's the information that you want to look at and say, okay, we actually did send out a 214, and all of a sudden now they're saying that we were only getting paid for a 213. So that information, again, you can post this payment. It's not going to post automatically in most cases because, again, it doesn't have that code. So at least the line for your 214 won't post. The rest of it may, using the new tool, using practice management. I believe this whole check will kick back because of the difference there. Or we'll go to manual, excuse me. But again, some things if you're looking in at your ERAs, that is one thing to take note of and make sure that, yes, we didn't change the code, the payer has turned around and kicked it back with something different. So I kind of want to take a quick aside and talk about some of the differences between the new ERA posting tool and the old one. So looking at these, when we have things that are going to manual entry, and this is something that we're looking to move over into the EHR, but currently, if you're using the like AutoPIP version in EHR, that is going to try to post as much as possible. It doesn't have as many of those blocks that we have here in practice management that you may be used to. So the difference for those is that when you're talking about exception list, and that's what we're going to be adding into the EHR so you can manage those. But as far as where you add those, that's going to be over in practice management. I will say that if you get to this screen where you're editing those and the list goes all the way over to the end, unfortunately you do need to call us because we have to edit the file in the background and change those. I will say please feel free just to call us anyway because we can add these in really quickly and make sure that those exceptions are going through. So what are these exceptions? These exceptions are when you have a cart code coming back from the payer and whether or not you want to allow that through. By default, if a cart comes in and it is related to insurance responsibility, that is not going to post when you're using AutoPIP in practice management. If you want that to come through, if you see, okay, well, we have all these cart codes that are coming in and they're still paying us the way, it's like an informational cart almost, and you want those to go through, you can call us, we can add that on and it will go through. The other side of this is that no matter what the CARC is, if it's related to patient responsibility, we let it through. So if you want those to come in and you say, oh, we don't want this to actually post automatically, even though it's a patient responsibility CARC, we can add it to make sure that it stops it and it brings those out to manual. Next thing is, how do you get more ERA in your system? You've signed up with a bunch of payers, but you still maybe have a few that are there. What do we need on our side of this? So you're going to be sending PCC a copy of a recent paper EOB. If you look that up from a patient portal, you can download it as a PDF and send it over to us, or you can scan it. We'll take that information, we'll work with the payer, we'll go and try to figure out the areas and routes that we need for that to make sure that's all set up for you. Before I move on, do we have any questions? Of course. So yeah, if you don't have an EOB, then patient name, payer ID, those are all very helpful for us to go down. We will do our best to get the ERAs set up. Unfortunately, not every payer offers them, but if they do and they're able to process through that, then we'll do our best to get those signed up.
So I've been using the new ERA tool in EHR, and I found that sometimes if there was a claim outstanding that I went in and went onto Availity and like posted it from that, like I hadn't seen it come through on the ERA, but I was doing, you know, follow-ups on outstanding claims.
Yeah.
And I've already posted the payment, and then say it comes in through the ERA, but it has different information, like it's like the rejection again, and I've already gotten the updated correct payment. Is there a way to deselect that auto payment from posting because it overwrites what I've already done? And
so
then I have to go in and delete the rows and unlink them.
There's not at this time. What it sounds like is happening for that is, you know, they have done a rejection or they've done a take back and then they send it. That's one of the things that can be a benefit, but also, like you said, if you're going and you're going ahead of what that first ERA is, the new ERA tool does automatically post takebacks if it can, meaning that if that comes in, it will see that there's payment there, it will issue a take back, and then issue the new payment or just do the take back. We don't at this time have a way. If you haven't already, please stop by the wishing well. Our developers love to hear stuff like that, and especially as we build the tool, we'd like to get it fully fleshed out. So that's a wonderful thing to add there.
So I know y'all just worked on TRICARE East after the Change Healthcare and got like a more direct way to send claims. But we still don't have, we get the TRICARE payments through our bank, but we still are not getting auto post. Is that like a known issue with TRICARE right now?
It is. That is something we're still working on. I guess I can give a quick update with Change Healthcare in general. We have been continually working with the payers to get those up to date. Some payers have, like they had said earlier, exclusive contracts with Change Healthcare. A quick route of how Change Healthcare works, if you don't know. Change Healthcare used to be a bunch of different smaller clearinghouses. It was MDON, it was Capario, it was Jan, if you name any others I can think of. Yep. So all of those individual clearinghouses that were their own entities at one point got bought out by Change Healthcare and absorbed into their system. The thing that didn't happen is that they were not brought up into the same background structure for that processing. So they essentially functioned, or most of, not all of them, but some of them functioned independently while they were all under the Change Healthcare umbrella. You still had MDON functioning over here. You still had Capario here, and they had their own individual, basically systems and servers all set up and processes. The downside, of course, is when the cyber attack happened, all of those systems got broken and they shut everything down because of the risk of the cyber attack. But in the process of them going back online, because those were all legacy systems that they just kept running, they've decided that they don't necessarily want to keep them running anymore, and they're moving stuff over to either a new system or they're building a new one for it. And unfortunately, from what I believe, TRICARE East is stuck in that, where they were on an older legacy system and they're in the process of building something new for them.
Also, for reference, we didn't get it auto-posted before the hack happened either. That was something that just didn't happen. So when everything is built on the TRICARE side and it's a thing that we can do, is that something that PCC will automatically just go ahead and start putting it auto-post? Or is there a way that I know, like, things are fixed where I can request it?
My advice is to please put your practice down for a request that gets started up when it's ready, okay. Because there is an enrollment that needs to happen that we need to do, like once that's ready and we get our other clients that already had been enrolled and those will go through, then those will automatically start kicking back in. But if you didn't have it beforehand, then please, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, get in touch with us. We can get you on a list and get we might even be able to start enrollment now. I'd have to check with our EDI folks if we can kick off the enrollment, but we may be able to actually just start that now. Okay. And since you're not getting them, just get the process going early.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, any other questions here or in the chat online? Okay. Well, I'll finish up a little bit early. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to stop by, ask any of the Get Paid folks, and we'll route those over. And this and all other recordings will be available through the app. Thank you all.